Hello everyone, I'm here at Tech Motorsports and it's rear subframe time. This is the part that I've been dreading the most. If you watched one of the previous episodes where I kind of took a look underneath, you could see that it's pretty rusted. So that's what I'm more nervous about, is just bolt shearing and just giving me a huge issues. But we're going to take care of a lot of that stuff, end up cleaning them up and doing some spray, the rust preventative on it, so that way it doesn't come back anymore. But yeah, so what we're going to go through is lower control arms are going to be replaced. We have adjustable ones. We have polyurethane bushings that are going to be replaced. We're going to be installing another diff that is a limited slip, not a one tire fire like this one is. And yeah, that should be it. So let's get started. Okay, so this has been the third time that I've sprayed WD-40 on all the boats that I'm hoping these are the ones, the ones that I'm going to end up removing. Hopefully I didn't miss any. If I did miss any, I hope they come off easily, but this is the third time. So I've soaked them once every day. So one more quick soak before I start, and then keep plugging away. So just going to start removing the shocks, getting the springs out, get that ball rolling, and then disconnecting the axles. Actually, I'll leave the axles in until I get it completely down. And then just the 4 bolts. Thank goodness I already have the drag shaft off and everything else, the exhaust. So it'll be a little bit easier to bring it down. So just keep plugging away at it. Okay, so I've already disconnected the ABS sensor and the brake rotor sensor and the ABS sensor on both sides. I've loosened the brake calipers, so I got to get these suckers off. And then what I'm going to end up doing, or what I end up doing as well, is release the brackets from the actual trailing on themselves. One bolt was already broken before I touched it, so one bolt down, but it wasn't due to me. So I got that, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to release these arms, the lower control arms, so that way I could swing the calipers through and keep them out of the way. That way I could just drop the whole entire subframe down. So. Okay, so next what I got to do is just remove the brake rotors and release the emergency brake cables. And I think at that point I'm ready to drop the subframe, just loosening the whole subframe bolts. Okay, so I've got pretty much everything disconnected. Figured out the noise on the right side rear brake, the e-brake. What happened was one of the nails that hold the brake shoe actually pulled through the rusted brake shield, and it came out. So when I took the rotor out, there was a spring that fell out, and then once I finally got everything removed, the nail then fell down. So we're gonna have to order one of those, which kind of sucks. I was hoping I could get this thing repaired and installed quickly, but looks like we're gonna have to wait on a part. So yeah, now I got everything pretty much on the jack. I've already released most of my bolts, and so yeah, let's go ahead and zip her down. All right, so we got the subframe out. It wasn't too bad once you have most of the stuff already off. Up to this point, I have yet to break a bolt. So she does look pretty rusty, a lot of surface rust on the diff and on the carrier, so that will be getting taken care of. One thing I did notice is when I pulled the nut off, because the 2 front ones should technically be nuts, so they should leave studs up on the chassis. Those pulled down. It's because of the nut was technically rusted on the stud, so that was the easiest point for them to come off. So that's the only oddball thing. But yeah, now I'm just going to end up tearing it all apart. All right, so we have one casualty already, but it didn't break, but it was already kind of chewed up a slight bit when it's been removed before. So once I started knocking it off, it stripped. So I got the axle bolt itself that goes to the diff. One of them is stripped, so that's the only one that's left. So what I'm having to do now is I already disconnected the actual trailing arm from the upper control arm, and I'm just going to pop the diff cup out and take the whole assembly and probably put that on a bench to try to on a vise and try to get that bolt out. And I might have to just cut it off, which is fine as long as I could access it and get it completely out. That'd be good. I have spare ones, so yeah, I'm gonna keep plugging away. All right, so there we go. I got it completely apart. I got the left-hand side trailing arm with the axle over there, and like I got to go take the this diff cap off the other axle. So I got to get that done, and in the interim, I'm going to go ahead and finish tearing this apart right quick. And there's the subframe, all in its bare. So now it's going to be time to clean this thing up. I'm gonna have to wire wheel it, knock off as much as the rust as I can, and look at it from there. I don't have a sand blaster or a bead blaster, so that's what's gonna end up taking. As long as I could just clean up all the rust and get all that cleaned up to where it's decent metal, and then I should be able to spray it, and it should be fine. But what a mess this thing is made on my floor. All right, so here's everything, and there's all the parts that are going to be installed, from the polyurethane bushings, the new lower control arms, everything that I stated before. We got the diff sitting back in the back that I got to pretty much assemble and install it. So that's going to be the next step. Is just going to go through and start installing all the polyurethane bushings. And also, if you look at the silver stuff right there, that's all the bolts that were cleaned as well. And then I painted those. I didn't want to do it, but how crappy would it look if I did everything else and then you're going to see a bunch of rusted bolts. So yeah, she's gonna look freaking awesome from underneath. Well, minus the rust that's on the chassis or surface rust. So, but still, it's gonna look way better than it did before. So let's get started on putting everything back together. All right, so I'm gonna start with the diff one, and I got leftover some nice little lube there from the other ones that I end up doing. All right, so there you go. The front one, I did start to try to bang it in at first, but it just made it so much more easier using my tool, and it did slide in pretty easy. When I kept looking at the caps, these are from polyurethane bushings, not the caps, but the polyurethane bushings, every individual one has a position marked of where they go. That's why I kept looking at them. And just in case I want to make sure I have the right one, I kept looking at each one. So there you go. So the subframe, the bushings are applied. So now it's just a matter of adding the other bushings to the other items, which I think they're one subframe. I'm going to do the upper spring perch. I'll do those because those are polyurethane bushings as well. And then I'll start on the assembly of the rear trailing arms. All right, just had to do one quick thing as I got it all together, and I realized that I put the pins inside the spacers. I forget what those things are called. I put them in wrong. They're supposed to be, I had them from front to rear, rear to front, so I went ahead and swapped those out and got that corrected. So let's keep moving forward. Well, my microphone strikes again. So most of the stuff that I end up filming, a couple clips of me assembling and getting to all this is with no audio at all. So I'm staring at the camera, talking, and nothing's coming out. All right, to go through on the upper spring perch again, the bushings were easy to install. The polys, just end up using the lubrication that comes with the packet. And Just got to remember which the instructions that come with it. They were Power ProFlex, I think, where the bushings are installed. They come with the instructions. Technically, what you have to look at is the longer or the fatter bushing goes towards the rear of the car for both. So that was easily installed. The bolts got put in place. These are somewhat torqued a little bit. Once I get the full chassis up there, I'll torque everything down. So I went ahead and installed the differential. I got the 2 bolts in the back. These are already tightened. I got the front one tight as well with the differential brace from Active Autowerks. So we got that. The only thing I need to do is once it's up bolted onto the chassis, I'll be able to finalize and install this section here, which I have to drill 2 holes from underneath and then put that plate with these screws in, and then that will be done. And then I also added the lower control arms as well, and added the axles. So right now what I was going to end up doing is jumping and assembling the trailing arm bushings. Okay, so got my 2 ball joints, and I'm going to go ahead and start getting these bad boys back together. All right, so now it's just time for to install the bearing and get my press here going. Okay, for starters, what I end up doing is I tap in the bearing slightly with the hammer. Just tried to get it as even as possible in there, so that way when I start pressing it, it doesn't move as much, so it'll start just pressing it in. So yeah. So this right here is just going to get me down to where the bearing is going to be flush with that. And what I end up doing is I put the old bearing that I've got underneath, and it'll finish pressing it in all the way with, and then the used bearing won't get stuck in there. And there we go. Bearing is looks like right in the spot. It's going to give me enough room for my circle clip to go in there, my clip. And what I end up doing is my socket here, or my little pin thingy, actually sits above in there, so it actually sits on this housing. It doesn't contact the bearing. Now when I press the other piece in, I will be contacting the bearing, so I'll show you that. Now it's time for the dust shield. You have to put the dust shield on first before you put the hub on. So let's get that ball rolling right here. I'll grab my nice little somewhat slightly painted bolts. Okay, so got my dust shield on, and there's my nice painted kind of bolts. Just looks so much better than that rusted stuff. So like I stated before, it would look so poopy that even though you won't see it back here, but I sleep at night and I think about these things. So next thing I'm going to do is I am going to do the same thing with the bearing. I'm going to tap this in place and try to get it as straight as possible, just to get it in kind of somewhat seated. Okay, now this one, I do not press on the housing. I actually press on the bearing itself, the inner sleeve. So I got a smaller socket for that, and I just put it right on the actual inner part of the bearing, the metal part, only the metal part. So you got to make sure you get the right size. Okay, so before I go any further, I always do this because I've caught myself before. I make sure I got everything that I need to have in there before I press the hub on that bearing. So my main thing is I got my dust shield on. It is in the correct spot. There's nothing outside of the ordinary. Now, I already knew because I already did one, but I just want to keep that momentum going because there's nothing worse than having to take it apart and have to buy another bearing. And there she is, all nice and snug, because this is where you press in from in here, from the actual bearing itself. That way you're keeping the bearings intact together, squeezed together. That way you don't have any issues with it coming apart. So now it's just a matter of putting the trailing arm bushings in, and then greasing up the axle ends and sliding these puppies on the actual subframe that's sitting over there, and throw it underneath this car. All right, so got the whole subframe pretty much almost all back together. There's a couple items that I'm leaving to install while it's up there. So yeah, let's go ahead and start getting to lowering the chassis on the subframe. Well, there she is. She's up and bolted, and just got to tighten the main bolts up, and we should be good. So the final stretch. Let's go over through the Active Autowerks. I actually, at first, I didn't care too much for the color, but it's grown on me. But so a few things that we need to look at or take in consideration is when you're doing this, what kind of diff bushing you have. Of course, I think this was pretty much made for an OEM bushing. So you have to take in consideration when you replace it with a polyurethane, or let's say an ECS one, where it has the bushing that sticks out and then a big washer on it. You have to think about that right there, because then this is going to sit away from the holes that you're supposed to utilize to drill straight through and to clamp it completely down. So I'm going to go through the process of one that has a different diff. There is a little bit of modifications, just a little bit, that has to be done. What I did is I already did a test fitting, and I could see a couple other areas where this brace rubs on the diff and in two places. So one of them is, just to show you real quick, it is right there. Rotate this correctly here. You can see where it's coming in, it's rubbing right there. And then also it rubs right here on the diff itself and even on top. So I'm going to try to create a little bit of better clearance, so that way when I have it installed, it's nice and snug, so that way I could drill my hose. Let me go ahead and clean these up. What I'm going to do is I'm going to grind this down this side here, but because of where this is at, one of these spots, I'm just going to take a grinder on the actual diff itself and get a little clearance in. I know, you know, it's been powder coated in some of the tolerances. That was a nice snug fit. Now it makes it a little bit tougher. So I'm going to clean those up just to make the installation just a little bit more smoother. Okay, so I got my my little spots grinded down. I also went ahead and put a little bit of bare metal primer type deal on it, so that way it's not bare metal. So now what I'm going to end up doing is, you know, Active Autowerks does have an instruction PDF on their website. If you guys want to look at that, that shows it, you know, goes through step by step as well. So on the steps for that was to drill right where these holes are already technically located at with a 3/8 drill bit. So let's get started. All right, so now it's just a matter of getting this up on there, getting the bolt somewhat in there, and then getting these screw in. Well, first, sorry about that. Got to put this plate on. So this plate goes on a certain way. So this section here is on the passenger side. I'm sorry. This section here goes on the passenger side. So what you want to do is when you insert it, it goes in from this way towards, so the slotted area goes towards the front. Another way to actually to look at it this way is you want to make sure that the flat bar or the whole section in the back, that you can see it from the back of the diff itself. So all right, so you want to line it up just to where it's sticking out just a tad bit, and of course you look underneath, which I don't have my flashlight. All right, so you just need to shift it just a tad bit. There we go. It should be pretty good. All right, so I got both my bolts in there. So now I know that the plate is technically right where it needs to be. It's nice and snug. So now it's just a matter of taking these back down. I'm hoping it doesn't move around, but if it is, I could realign it. But I just wanted to make sure that the hose and everything was lining up. And now it's time for this piece. So also, before you install this, you got to make sure that this nut is all the way out. That way it doesn't protrude out. This will be your pinch nut that you'll do, and you'll tighten once you get this bolt in tightened and the bolts underneath tightened as well. Then you'll tighten this down. Okay, so I've gotten it just somewhat tight so we could draw it in. And let's see now if I can get it looks a little bit tight. Now, this is where I'm gonna have to be a little creative with it, but it's really close. The hose, see here? So let me see if I could draw it in more and bring it in just a tad bit, so that way I don't have to cut or slot out the current hose. Remember, the reason why we might have to do this is because the front bushing is polyurethane. It's not an OEM one, and is a little thicker, so I am off by a tad bit. So I'm hoping that by drawing it in a little bit more tighter, I can get these bolts just I can get these the bolts through here without having to cut into the brace. Okay, so what I had to end up doing is taking the, well, I'm gonna say the right side of the vehicle, one off to be able to get this one a little bit better. And the plate is not completely straight. As you can see, there's a gap here and there's not one here, but I had to loosen the actual brace. So now I'm gonna go in and start tightening. I'm hoping this starts to straighten out a little bit, but now I have my bolts. These are still loose, so I could go ahead and take care of that. So yeah, so when I drawed it in a little bit and tapped it, it straightened out just a little bit, but it's gonna work. So now I can finish tightening these. And then I have the pinch nut all the way up on the top. So there we go. It took a little bit of moving it around, but the hose did end up lining up. It didn't, I was hoping it would have lined more evenly, but the polyurethane bushing is probably just tweaked it just a tad bit, but everything seems to be in place. And just to give you an example on how I'm understanding this works, is that now with this brace attached to the rear subframe, and then also surrounds the actual bushing itself with the bolt, that it eliminates all that tension on that one single bolt up there. So it kind of spreads it out to the subframe, the plate here, and all the way around. So it should make it for a lot more stronger system, because usually that bolt shears off. So yeah, so now I'm just gonna end up doing is finalizing everything else. All right, so I got the trailing arm bushings already installed. So now it's time to start raising the suspension up so I can put the springs in and getting that locked down. My lower control arms, I'm gonna leave them loose because what I'm gonna end up doing is once I get those attached up top and the shock bolted on, I have to lower the lower control arms so that I can route my calipers through and then bolt them up here. Well, get ready to bolt them on there after I put the caliper and the brakes, the e-brakes pads back there. So yeah. Okay, so the subframe is all back in. The only thing I have to do is tighten the sway bar links and tighten the bottom one bolts themselves. and just go over it one more time to make sure everything is good. I got my drive shaft sitting there, so I have to replace the carrier bearing, so I'll do that, and then the drive shaft goes in, and I already got my my studs already there. They just need to be tightened as well, but in my nuts, gotta get the axle nuts done. But that's pretty much about it, and that pretty much covers the rear differential. If you guys have any questions, put them in the comments. Like always, like and subscribe, and see you in the next episode.